The broken chains. The room was quiet except for the slow, steady hum of the ship's engines. The walls were silver and cold, built with no thought of comfort. Kayla stood near the far wall, her arms wrapped tightly around herself. She could feel the cold metal under her feet. In front of her stood the human, his wrists red where the chains had once dug into his skin. Now the chains lay broken on the floor, a silent sign that everything had changed. Kayla had been the one who ordered the chains. She had been the one who believed he was nothing but a creature, a lesser being to be studied and used. That was what the Empire had taught her. But now, looking into his eyes, she saw something she had never expected. There was no anger in his gaze, no hatred, only confusion, sadness, and something else she could not name. "Don't gaze at me like that, human," Kayla whispered, her voice shaking. It was supposed to sound cold, but it came out weak, almost begging. She turned her face away, unable to hold his eyes any longer. Shame burned through her chest, hotter than any wound she had ever taken in battle. The human said nothing. He only watched her, standing tall despite the pain he must have felt. Kayla wondered how he could still stand after everything they had done to him. There were bruises on his arms, cuts on his hands. Yet he stood like a mountain, unbroken and silent. A loud beep echoed through the room. Kayla's heart jumped. The Empire's patrol would come soon. They would find the broken chains. They would find her standing there with the human free. They would know she had betrayed them. There would be no mercy. Not for him. Not for her. She had to make a choice, and she had to make it now. Kayla stepped forward, her hands trembling. She reached for the human's arm but stopped herself. Would he even trust her after what she had done? Could she blame him if he didn't? She dropped her hand and spoke instead. "Come with me," she said. Her voice was steadier now. She met his eyes again, forcing herself to be strong. "If you stay here, they will kill you. If you trust me, maybe we can escape." The human's face showed no clear emotion, but his body shifted slightly, as if he was considering. Seconds felt like hours. Then finally, he nodded once, slow and cautious. Relief and fear rushed through Kayla all at once. There was no going back now. She moved quickly to the door, pressing her hand against the scanner. The door slid open with a hiss, revealing a long, empty hallway lit by cold blue lights. She motioned for him to follow. He did, moving carefully but without hesitation. The halls felt endless. Every footstep echoed. Kayla kept glancing over her shoulder, expecting soldiers to appear at any second. Her heart pounded so loudly she was sure he could hear it. They passed, a guard station, empty for now. Kayla grabbed a small blaster from the desk, shoving it into her belt. She handed another one to the human. He took it but looked at it with uncertainty. She realized he had probably never used one before. The Empire had forbidden prisoners from even touching weapons. They reached a flight of stairs leading down to the docking bay. As they descended, Kayla heard voices behind them. Shouts. Someone had found the broken chains. "Hurry," she said, and this time the human didn't hesitate. They burst into the docking bay. Ships of all shapes and sizes rested there, but Kayla knew most of them were locked down tight. Only a few old transport vessels were left unguarded. She sprinted toward the nearest one, praying it would still work. The ramp to the ship was down, a miracle. Kayla rushed inside, the human close behind her. The interior was dark and smelled of oil and old smoke. She ran to the control panel, her fingers flying over the switches. The ship groaned to life, lights flickering weakly. "We're not safe yet," she muttered. Outside, footsteps pounded closer. Alarms blared, red lights flashed. Kayla slammed the ramp control. The door began to rise slowly, far too slowly. She saw the first soldiers round the corner, their weapons raised. Without thinking, she grabbed her blaster and fired, aiming for the floor to make them scatter. The ship jerked as the engines roared to full power. Kayla grabbed the human's hand, pulling him into the seat beside her. "Hold on," she said. The ship shot forward, scraping the edge of the docking bay as it tore into space. Alarms screamed behind them. Blasts from the soldiers' guns zipped past, missing them by inches. Then suddenly, silence. They were free. Kayla slumped back in her seat, breathing hard. Beside her, the human sat quietly, his eyes still on her. Not in anger, not in fear. Something deeper. Kayla looked away, ashamed once more. She had broken his chains, but could she ever fix the damage she had caused? Only time would tell. Tioi. Silent escape. The small ship shook as it pushed deeper into space. Kayla tightened her grip on the steering controls, her knuckles pale. The human sat quietly beside her, his body tense, his eyes never leaving the dark void outside the window. Behind them, the Empire's prison ship grew smaller and smaller, but Kayla knew they were far from safe. Patrol ships would already be looking for them, and when they found them, there would be no warning, only fire. The ship's engines coughed and sputtered. Kayla cursed under her breath. This transport was never meant for a real chase. It was old, almost falling apart, and there were warning lights flashing across the dashboard. Fuel low, shield damage, engine unstable. Every light seemed to scream the same thing. You are not going to make it. Kayla pulled the ship into a nearby asteroid belt, hoping the thick rocks would hide them. The human watched her closely, still silent. He had not spoken a word since they had escaped. Kayla wondered if he even trusted her, or if he was just waiting for the right moment to turn against her. She would not blame him. After everything the Empire had done, trust was a fragile thing. The asteroids drifted around them, giant shadows floating through the darkness. Kayla steered carefully, weaving between them. One wrong move, and the ship would shatter like glass. The engines groaned with every turn. Kayla's heart beat faster with every second. Suddenly, a sharp beep filled the cockpit. Kayla glanced at the screen and froze. A patrol ship was scanning the belt. If they were caught here, they would be trapped like animals. She looked at the human. His face was calm, but his hands were clenched into fists on his lap. He knew. He understood the danger even without words. "We need to hide," Kayla said quickly. She turned the ship toward a cluster of larger asteroids. If she could find one big enough, maybe they could land on it, power down the engines, and mask their signal. The ship dipped lower, skimming close to the rocky surfaces. Kayla spotted a deep crevice between two massive stones. It was narrow, barely wide enough for their ship, but it was their best chance. "Hold on," she warned. The human grabbed the edge of his seat as Kayla guided the ship into the crevice. The walls were so close they scraped the sides of the ship, sending sharp grating sounds through the hull, but somehow they fit. Kayla powered down the engines. The lights inside the ship dimmed to almost nothing. They sat in the darkness, listening to their own breathing. Minutes passed. Maybe hours. It was hard to tell. The patrol ship drifted closer, its bright searchlights sweeping across the asteroids. Once the light passed so near their hiding place that Kayla could see the reflection shining through the cracks of the ship's hull. She barely dared to breathe. She could feel the human beside her, still and watchful. The light moved away. The patrol ship hovered for a long moment, as if sensing something was wrong. Kayla's heart pounded so loudly she thought it would give them away. But finally, the patrol moved on, its engines fading into the distance. Kayla let out a long breath she hadn't realized she was holding. They were safe, for now. She turned in her seat to look at the human. For the first time, she saw a flicker of something in his eyes. Trust. Small, but real. "We need to fix this ship," Kayla said quietly. "We can't run forever like this." The human nodded. Slowly, carefully, he stood up. Kayla noticed the way he favored his left leg. He was injured, but he hid the pain well. Together, they moved through the ship, checking the damage. Sparks flew from broken panels. Wires dangled from the ceiling. The engine room was worse. Smoke filled the air, and parts of the machinery were burnt black. Kayla cursed under her breath again. They needed tools, parts, things they didn't have. The human pointed to a small crate tucked in the corner. Kayla opened it and smiled for the first time in days. Inside were emergency supplies, basic repair kits, and a few energy packs. It wasn't much, but it was enough to patch the ship and keep them flying a little longer. They worked side by side, in silence. Kayla watched the human from the corner of her eye. His hands were steady, skilled. He knew machines, understood them the way few did. She realized then that he was not just some primitive creature, as the Empire had taught. He was strong, clever, and dangerous in ways they could not imagine. As they worked, Kayla's mind raced. She thought about the Empire, about her own people. She thought about the human's gaze, the way he had looked at her, not with hatred, but with something closer to sorrow. She had made a terrible mistake, but maybe, just maybe, she could still make it right. The ship's systems flickered back to life. It was weak, but it was enough. Kayla powered up the engines once more. The ship rose slowly, pulling free of the asteroid crevice. The human sat, back in his chair, breathing hard but steady. Kayla looked at him and nodded. They were not safe yet, but they were alive. And together, they might just have a chance. Somewhere in the distance beyond the stars, freedom waited. They would find it, or they would die trying. The pursuit, the engines roared weakly as Kayla guided the ship away from the asteroid belt. The human sat beside her, silent but alert, his eyes scanning the darkness of space. For a brief moment they both believed they had escaped, but hope was a fragile thing in a galaxy ruled by the Empire. A sharp alarm cut through the cockpit, loud and urgent. Kayla's heart dropped. On the screen, 3 Empire patrol ships appeared, moving fast and closing the distance between them with deadly speed. "They found us," Kayla muttered, her fingers flying across the control panel. She pushed the engines harder, but the ship protested with a sick groan. Warning lights flashed again. The human gripped the edge of the seat, understanding the danger without a single word. The patrol ships began to fire. Bright blasts of energy lit up the void, streaking past them like burning comets. Kayla weaved the ship through the open space, dodging the shots as best she could. But the old transport was slow, wounded, and no match for the sleek Empire fighters. "We need cover," Kayla said through gritted teeth. She scanned the stars for anything at all that could give them a chance. Ahead, a dense field of broken satellites, debris from a long-forgotten war, floated like a graveyard in space. It was a risky place to fly. Sharp metal, hidden, mines, and no clear paths. But it was also their only hope. Kayla steered the ship into the debris field. Immediately, the world outside the windows changed. Twisted wreckage spun slowly through the darkness, reflecting strange, broken light. Pieces of old ships, shattered weapons, and ruined stations drifted all around them. The Empire ships hesitated at the edge of the field. Kayla saw it. They knew it was dangerous too. But they would not stop. They had their orders. The human leaned forward, pointing at a narrow gap between 2 massive spinning wrecks. Kayla nodded and slipped the ship through the opening. The sides scraped against the twisted metal, but they made it through. Blasts followed them, striking nearby debris and sending shrapnel flying. One shard punched through the side of their ship, cutting a hole just above Kayla's head. She ducked instinctively, her heart hammering in her chest. "We can't keep this up," she said. Her voice was tight with fear. The human moved suddenly, reaching for the control panel. For a moment, Kayla tensed, thinking he might do something reckless, but he simply pulled up a schematic of the ship and pointed to a hidden auxiliary thruster system, something she had forgotten about. Kayla stared at him in surprise. He knew ships better than she did. Without wasting time, she rerouted power to the auxiliary thrusters. The ship surged forward with new life, darting between the wrecks with a speed they hadn't had before. The Empire fighters struggled to keep up, crashing into debris or falling behind. But it wasn't over yet. One fighter, faster and more skilled than the others, stayed on their tail. Kayla could feel the pilot's skill through every sharp turn, every perfectly timed shot. The human glanced at her, then at the back of the ship. Kayla understood. They needed to fight back, or they would be picked apart. Leaving the controls to her for a moment, the human rushed to the weapons station. Kayla saw him hesitate, studying the unfamiliar controls. But then, with calm hands, he aimed the ship's rear cannons. The Empire fighter moved closer, locking onto them. The human waited, his finger hovering over the trigger. Closer. Closer. The enemy ship fired. At the last second, the human unleashed a blast from their cannons. It struck a piece of drifting wreckage, sending it spinning straight into the path of the Empire fighter. The fighter tried to dodge, but it was too late. It slammed into the debris, exploding in a bright, silent fireball. Kayla let out a breath she didn't know she was holding. They had won. For now, she guided the ship out of the debris field, back into open space. Behind them, the surviving patrol. Ships were still searching, but they were lost, hunting ghosts. In the quiet that followed, Kayla turned to look at the human. He sat calmly at the weapons station, his face serious but not afraid. "You saved us," she said softly. He looked at her then, a small, almost invisible smile on his lips. Kayla felt something shift inside her, something deep and powerful. The human was not just a survivor. He was a warrior. He was someone who refused to break, no matter how hard the Empire tried, and she was beginning to realize she could not do this without him. The ship drifted into the shadow of a dead moon, hidden once again. Kayla powered down the engines to avoid detection. The cockpit dimmed to darkness, broken only by the soft glow of distant stars. They sat together in the silence, two fugitives bound by choices, by survival, and by a growing understanding that neither of them could explain. Outside, the galaxy stretched endlessly, filled with dangers and hopes they had yet to face. Inside the ship, Kayla made a silent promise. She would not fail him again. Memories of Earth, the dead moon floated silently beneath them, casting long shadows across the ship's worn metal surface. Kayla leaned back in the pilot's chair, her body aching with exhaustion. The human sat nearby, his eyes fixed on the stars outside. For the first time since their escape, there was no alarm, no gunfire, no chasing ships, only silence and the cold comfort of being alive. Kayla looked at the human, wondering about the life he had left behind. What dreams had been stolen from him by the Empire's cruelty? What memories did he carry that they had tried so hard to erase? "Tell me about Earth," she said quietly, her voice barely more than a whisper. The human turned his head slowly. His face softened. For a moment, Kayla thought he would stay silent, as he had so many times before. But then he spoke. His voice, rough but steady. He spoke of green fields that stretched farther than the eye could see, of oceans that roared with life, of forests so old and deep that even sunlight struggled to find its way through the trees. He told her about rainstorms that danced across city streets, of laughter shared under open skies, of music that made even the heaviest heart feel light again. Kayla listened, each word painting a world she had never known. In the Empire's teachings, Earth was a broken place filled with chaos and weakness, but in the human's voice, Earth was alive, beautiful, full of hope and strength. He spoke of a small town where he had lived as a child, of long summer days spent climbing trees and running through fields. He spoke of a mother who had sung to him at night, of a father who had built toys from scraps just to see him smile. Simple things, human things. Kayla felt something stir inside her, something warm and painful all at once. She realized how much had been stolen from him, how much the Empire had destroyed without a second thought. He reached into the ship's console and pulled out a small device, battered and old. With a few careful taps, he brought it to life. Soft music filled the cockpit, the notes slow and full of longing. Kayla had never heard anything like it. No imperial march, no cold anthem of war. This music was different. It was a story without words, a memory made into sound. The human closed his eyes, lost in the melody. Kayla sat still, afraid to break the fragile moment. She thought about her own world, a place where emotions were seen as weakness, where loyalty was demanded, not earned. She had grown up in a system that taught her to follow orders, not dreams. Listening to the music, she wondered if she had ever truly lived at all. The human opened his eyes and looked at her, not as an enemy, not as a captor, but as something else, something closer to an equal. "You would like it," he said simply. "Earth," Kayla smiled, a small broken thing. Maybe one day, she said. The ship drifted in silence for a while longer. Kayla checked the scanners, but there were no signs of pursuit. The Empire had lost them, at least for now. They moved to the back of the ship, where a small storage room held the few supplies they had. Kayla found some dried food and water packs. She handed one to the human, who accepted it with a quiet nod. They sat on the floor sharing the simple meal. No words were needed. In that moment, the silence was not heavy. It was a bridge between two survivors, two souls who had seen too much and yet somehow still hoped for more. Kayla studied the human's face in the dim light. There were scars there, old and new, marks of battles fought and losses endured. But there was also a strength that the Empire had failed to crush, a spark that refused to die. She realized then that the human was not broken. He was something the Empire could never understand. Resilient, stubborn, alive. Kayla felt a deep, painful shame for her part in his suffering, but she also felt something else, a determination to be better, to change. We'll find a way, she said softly, to a place where the Empire can't reach us. The human looked at her, and for the first time, there was no doubt in his eyes. Only trust. The ship's systems beeped softly, a reminder that time was still moving, that dangers still lurked beyond the stars. Kayla stood, stretching her stiff limbs. Rest, she said. I'll take the first watch. The human hesitated, then nodded. He lay down on the narrow bench, closing his eyes. Kayla returned to the cockpit, sitting alone with the stars. She thought of the green fields he had described, the oceans, the music. She thought of Earth, a world she had never seen but now longed for more than anything. As the ship drifted through the endless dark, Kayla made another silent promise. She would get him home, no matter what it cost. The betrayal within the days blurred together as the ship drifted through the forgotten edges of space. Kayla spent most of her time repairing broken systems, while the human studied old maps, searching for a place where they could land without being hunted. Hope grew between them like a fragile plant, but Kayla knew it could be crushed at any moment. The ship was quiet one night when it happened. Kayla had been running diagnostics when she noticed something strange. A small power drain, almost invisible, hidden deep within the ship's systems. She frowned, tracing the drain's source through the tangled mess of wires and circuits. It led to a hidden transmitter, carefully tucked away behind a maintenance panel. Her blood ran cold. Someone had been sending signals. Before she could react, a noise behind her made her spin around. Standing in the doorway was a figure she had barely noticed during their first desperate escape. A small, thin alien with grayish skin and sharp, narrow eyes. Kayla remembered seeing him once in the prison cells, another forgotten prisoner. She had assumed he had been captured like the human, but she had been wrong. He held a small blaster pointed at her chest, his face twisted in a smirk. The Empire rewards loyalty, he said in a low, hissing voice. I never planned to escape. I planned to lead them to you. Kayla's mind raced. She had been so focused on the human, so desperate to make up for her mistakes, that she had let her guard down. Now it might cost them both everything. Slowly, she raised her hands, trying to buy time. If you send that signal, they'll kill all of us, she said carefully. You think they'll spare you? The alien sneered. They promised me freedom, power. I have no need for mercy. The transmitter beeped softly, a sign that the signal had already been sent. Kayla's heart twisted. The Empire knew where they were, and they were coming. The human appeared behind the traitor without a sound. In a flash, he lunged forward, grabbing the alien's wrist and twisting it sharply. The blaster clattered to the floor. The traitor screamed and fought back, but the human moved with a fierce strength, pinning him easily. Kayla rushed forward, kicking the blaster away. Together, they forced the alien to the floor, binding his hands with a strip of torn wiring. The ship's scanners flashed with warnings. Empire ships were closing in fast. They didn't have time to argue, to punish the traitor. They barely had time to survive. Kayla dragged the struggling alien to the escape pod bay. She slammed the door open and threw him inside. Before he could react, She launched the pod into the void, sending him spinning helplessly through space. "Good luck with your empire," she muttered under her breath. Back at the controls, Kayla and the human worked together without needing to speak. Alarms blared, engines shook, the whole ship felt ready to fall apart, but neither of them hesitated. They powered up the last of the auxiliary thrusters and set a course for a nearby planet. A cold, rocky world with thick clouds and storms strong enough to hide from scanners. It was risky. Landing might destroy the ship completely, but it was their only chance. The human strapped himself into the seat beside Kayla. She caught his eye and gave him a small, grim smile. "Hold on," she said. The ship plunged into the planet's atmosphere. Winds battered them from all sides. Lightning cracked across the sky, blinding flashes of white and blue. The ship's hull groaned under the pressure, panels tearing free, alarm screaming. Kayla fought the controls with every bit of strength she had. The ground rushed up to meet them, dark and broken. At the last moment, she found a small clearing among the jagged rocks. She leveled the ship as best she could and hit the emergency thrusters. They slammed into the ground with bone-rattling force. Silence followed, broken only by the hiss of cooling metal. Kayla blinked through the smoke filling the cockpit. She turned to the human. He was alive. Bruised, bloody, but alive. Relief flooded her so strongly she almost laughed. They unstrapped themselves and stumbled out of the ship into the cold air. The storm howled around them, rain slicing sideways through the darkness. The ship was ruined. It would never fly again. But they had survived. The human moved to her side, his hand resting lightly on her shoulder. It was not a gesture of ownership or command. It was simple, grounding, a promise that he was still there. Kayla looked up at the broken sky and made another silent vow. They had faced betrayal and fire. They had lost their ship, their safety. But they had each other. And somehow, she knew that would be enough. They would find a way forward, no matter how long it took. Desperate stand. The cold wind whipped around them as Kayla and the human moved through the broken landscape. The ground beneath their feet was rough and sharp, made of black stone and twisted metal from old battles long forgotten. The storm above raged on, hiding the stars and the enemy that would surely come looking for them. Their ship was dead, a smoking wreck behind them. They had salvaged what little they could: 2 old blasters, a few emergency packs, and a handheld scanner with a flickering screen. Kayla clutched the scanner tightly, watching the blips move across the screen. Friendly signals were close, hidden deep within the rocky hills. "There's a rebel base nearby," she said, her voice loud against the howling wind. "If we can reach it, we might have a chance." The human nodded without hesitation. Together, they pressed on, climbing over sharp rocks, their bodies battered and bruised from the crash. Kayla could feel the weight of every mistake she had made pressing against her chest, but she pushed forward. She would not fail him again. Not now. After hours of hard travel, they reached a narrow canyon. Hidden at the far end, half buried in the stone, was an old steel door. Kayla tapped out a code she barely remembered. For a long moment, nothing happened. Then slowly, the door creaked open. Inside, a group of rebels stood waiting. Humans, aliens, survivors of every kind. Their eyes were hard, suspicious. They raised weapons at Kayla and the human as they entered. "Who are you?" one of them demanded. Kayla stepped forward, hands raised to show she meant no harm. "We're fugitives from the Empire," she said. "We need shelter. We can fight." There was a long pause. Then an older human, his face lined with years of war, nodded. Slowly, "If you can fight," he said, "you're welcome." They were given a place to rest, but it was clear the safety would not last. The Empire was already searching the planet, their ships sweeping low through the storms. The base buzzed with activity, preparing for the battle they all knew was coming. Kayla spent the next hours helping however she could, fixing weapons, repairing shields, setting traps around the canyon's narrow entrance. The human worked beside her, silent and steady, his movements sure. The other rebels began to notice him, respect growing in their eyes. When night fell, the warning alarm sounded. Through the thick rain, Kyla saw the first shapes of Empire soldiers moving toward the canyon. Dozens of them, maybe hundreds. The rebels scrambled to their positions. Kayla grabbed a blaster and climbed to a ledge overlooking the entrance. The human was there beside her, his face calm, his eyes sharp. "This is it," Kayla said. He nodded once. The Empire attacked with no mercy. Bright blasts lit up the night, cutting through the storm. Kayla fired again and again, feeling the kick of the blaster in her hands. Soldiers fell, but more kept coming. Around her, rebels shouted orders, screamed in pain, fought with everything they had. The air smelled of burning metal and blood. The human fought like a shadow, moving through the chaos with deadly grace. He protected the wounded, pushed back the enemy where the line was weakest. Kayla followed his lead, fighting not for herself, but for him, for the chance to build something better. But the Empire was too strong. They brought in heavy walkers, machines of war that crushed stone and life beneath their massive feet. The rebels fell back step by step, retreating deeper into the canyon. Kayla realized with a sick feeling that they would not win this fight, not unless someone did something drastic. "I'll hold them here," Kayla said suddenly, grabbing the human's arm. "You lead the others out. There's a tunnel behind the base. It leads to the mountains." He shook his head fiercely. He would not leave her. She saw it in his eyes. "You have to," she said. "They need you." For a long moment he stared at her. Then slowly he pressed his forehead against hers, a gesture of trust, of respect. It was more powerful than any words. Then he turned and ran, gathering the others, leading them into the escape tunnel. Kayla stayed behind, planting explosives along the canyon walls. As the Empire forces stormed closer, she set them off, one by one. The walls crumbled, sending tons of rock crashing down, blocking the path. But not before a stray blast caught her in the side, throwing her to the ground. Pain flared through her body. She lay there, the storm washing over her, the sounds of battle fading into the distance. Was this the end? Footsteps approached. Strong hands lifted her gently from the ground. The human. He had come back for her. He carried her through the rain, back toward the hidden tunnel. Kayla clung to consciousness, feeling the steady beat of his heart through his chest. Behind them, the Empire forces raged, but they could not reach them now. They had made a stand, and they had survived, together. Facing the weight, the hidden tunnel twisted deep under the mountains, dark and narrow, carved long ago by hands desperate for freedom. The human moved quickly through the shadows, carrying Kayla in his arms. She was barely conscious, her body weak and broken from the fight. The rebels followed close behind, their faces grim but determined. Outside, the Empire raged, but they were too late. The mountain had swallowed its fugitives whole. They traveled for hours, the air growing colder. With every step, Kayla drifted in and out of sleep, her mind filled with broken flashes of the battle, of falling rain, of the human's steady eyes refusing to leave her behind. Each time she woke, she found herself still in his arms, still safe, and somehow that gave her the strength to hold on. Finally, the tunnel opened into a hidden valley, a place untouched by Empire hands. Thick forests stretched across the hills, mist curling around the trees like ancient spirits. There were small huts built into the rock, old and worn but strong. The rebels who had escaped with them began to move into the shelters, tending to their wounded, lighting fires, whispering prayers to stars they could not see. The human laid Kayla down gently near one of the fires. He knelt beside her, checking her wounds with careful hands. Kayla tried to speak, but no words came out. She saw the worry etched into his face, the way his mouth tightened as he worked to heal her. He did not speak either, but his actions were louder than any words. A rebel medic rushed over with supplies, working quickly to treat Kayla's injuries. The pain was sharp, but Kayla barely felt it. All she could see was the human sitting there, refusing to leave her side. When the medic finished, she whispered that Kayla needed rest, that she would survive if she stayed warm and still. The human nodded and placed a rough blanket over her, tucking it in gently as if he feared she might vanish if he let go. The night stretched long and cold. Storms rumbled far away, but the valley remained quiet, a hidden pocket of peace in a galaxy torn by war. Kayla drifted into a deep, healing sleep, her dreams filled with strange images, green fields, blue oceans, the sound of laughter under a wide-open sky. When she woke, it was to the soft light of morning. Mist still clung to the valley floor, but the sun was rising, pale and golden through the clouds. The human sat beside her, his back resting against a stone wall, his head tilted back in sleep. He looked different now. Not a prisoner, not a weapon, just a man who had fought for survival, for freedom, and for her. Kayla pushed herself up slowly, ignoring the ache in her ribs. She sat there for a long time, just watching him, feeling the weight of everything they had endured. Memories flooded her, how she had once chained him, how she had believed the Empire's lies, how she had treated him as less. Shame twisted inside her, sharp and bitter. She did not deserve his trust, his loyalty, and yet, here he was, still beside her, still choosing to stay. When the human stirred awake, his eyes found hers instantly. He smiled a little, a small, tired smile that warmed her more than the fire ever could. Kayla reached out, her hand trembling, and touched his arm. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice cracking. He shook his head slowly, as if telling her she owed him nothing. But she did. She owed him everything. The rebels gathered around the fire, sharing quiet plans for the future. They would build a new home here, hidden from the Empire's reach. They would find allies among the stars. They would fight, not for power, but for the right to live free. Kayla and the human joined them side by side, their bond unspoken but stronger than any oath. As the sun rose higher, Kayla walked slowly to the edge of the valley. She stood there staring out at the endless sky. She thought of Earth, the place the human had described in such beautiful detail. Green fields, oceans, songs under open skies. One day she would see it with him. One day they would walk those fields together. No chains, no empire to fear. Kayla closed her eyes and made a silent promise to the winds. She would spend the rest of her life fighting, not because she was ordered to, but because she chose to, because freedom was worth every scar, every loss, every sacrifice. Behind her, she heard the human's footsteps as he approached. He stood beside her without speaking, his presence a steady weight at her side. Kayla opened her eyes and smiled, a real smile, small but true. "Let's go home," she said softly. The human nodded. Together, they turned away from the past, facing the unknown future with open hearts. Whatever waited beyond the mountains, beyond the stars, they would meet it together. Not as captor and prisoner, but as something stronger, as survivors, as friends, as the first sparks of a new beginning.